out of the corner of my eye.
Ooh.
That was trippy. What are you drinking, Dustin?
This is the best drink I've made in some time.
Oh,
Best drink you've made in some time.
Yeah, I have a buddy who went through something terrible recently. He's gonna hang tonight, and so I requested an old fashioned with rum, and I pulled out a bottle of Pussers, uh, and I made some cinnamon syrup, and I made an old fashioned with those, and it is
with
delicious.
rum?
Oh yeah, you can do that.
A
That's right.
rum old fashioned?
Yeah, especially if it's good rum.
Oh shit! That's going
Dustin
on the
just likes
list.
rum in general.
I really
But
like rum.
this
I'm
is
in. I'm with you on that.
the cinnamon with the Pussers is like what you use to make a really good painkiller, and this is fantastic.
Oh shit! Actually, that reminds me. I forgot to take my painkillers because I have a temporary crown, and it's like I have to take ibuprofen all day. I'll be right back. Sorry.
All right.
But I've
We
been making tiki drinks too. We should talk about that later. Okay.
this is a high quality conversation is tiki drinks. Dustin takes it seriously. You really you don't have enough guitars in your background, Dustin. You think
I know I don't have that vibe going on.
Dan's just got a stack of them?
I know he's got the cool. I don't have room for it. I had
Plus-
my office is in my closet in my room, so facing into my closet. I built a desk.
Well, once Dan's back, we will get going seriously for those of you that are hanging out online in different
Am I
locations.
supposed to be tracking on my end?
What do you mean?
Like, am I supposed to be recording separately or no? This is your
No,
All right.
I don't worry about that.
Okay.
Um,
I was gonna the other day. I was telling someone this.
hold on. Tyler thinks my house is gorgeous.
No, this is what I'm going to talk about.
Okay.
As much as like your hair is like blurring in and out, I still believe that you're in that Hobbit house. Like in my head, I kept being like, "It's so nice there, the light."
Oh, well.
Do you believe that you're in it when you see your face?
I mean, I appreciate being in a Hobbit house. Will wants to know what you're thinking of season 2 of Mandalorian before Dan's back, who just will.
Out.
Dan doesn't appreciate Star Wars appropriately.
Oh, okay. Here, I need to get nerdtastic. Hold on.
Oh, that's his D&D background.
But the light's too strong behind me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like inappropriately excited about Mandalorian season 2. Mostly because, like all of you, like lockdown's been crazy. So the idea that for multiple weeks in a row I get a new Star Wars show is about just thrilling. Also,
I like the first one. I'm not like I have my problems with it, but it's overall seems fun.
I just like new Star Wars every week. That's just is great. I mean, it's way better than that Ewok show, which I think they've tried to make disappear.
There was an Ewok show?
Oh yeah. Have you seen the Christmas special? The Star Wars Christmas special?
Bits of it. But have you seen the Ewok Adventure and Battle for Endor?
If we're gonna talk about Star Wars, I have other things to do.
Oh, I know that someone specifically said, "Hey, Dan's gone. Talk about Star Wars new Mandalorian season."
I guess I'm honored that somebody knows me well enough to know that I don't give a shit about that.
Yeah. All right. 1 minute.
I tried. We did watch it. We watched The Mandalorian, but I
want to make sure Elgin's not on the internet. It just like, you know how he got a phone, and I think he like takes it to his room, and he's like making YouTube playlist of live concert videos where you can see the drummer, and then he watches them and tries to do what the drummer does, and which I'm totally down with him being a drummer. Just it's 10 o'clock. I'm gonna mute myself in case I sound like an authoritarian father for a minute.
Yeah, we wouldn't want anybody getting that impression.
Don't talk about Star Wars.
Don't worry. All right, Dustin, it's just you and me. So you made a rum old fashioned here,
Yeah,
and I'm just having a pretty boring G&T with Trader Joe's tonic.
and I don't love that tonic. It's okay.
It's fine. It was in the fridge.
Yeah, I
I
actually
didn't
really
buy it.
like doing the Fever Tree, like their light one, because it's not light, like they didn't put some weird
It's
chemical.
not artificial sweetener.
Just like it's sweetened with some juice and not a ton of it.
Mm.
Great. I like it.
Interesting. Yeah, I've been getting into the kind of tiki adjacent world with rum blends and some fresh juice and syrup, and I got a couple of those like special mixers for tiki drinks like falernum
Mm-hmm.
and whatnot. Pretty fun. I can't have two of them because they're strong, and
Depends.
like I can drink a fair amount, but I get down that tiki road and it happens quick and it can become pretty paralyzing pretty fast.
All right.
It's the quickest way to regret for me drinking wise is tiki drinks.
Well,
So I have to kind of stick to
don't do too
one.
much sugar.
Well,
That's the real regret.
The real regret
Yeah.
is never having tried it all. What trip?
yeah, Dan. I'm doing European lagers because
Yeah.
Dan's doing a beer bracket, and
Yeah.
this is Taps AFF.
Dude,
from
that shit
Winton
is
Brewery.
Taps AF.
I know.
F. It's
Um,
Taps as fucking fuck, dude.
Oh yeah. So
We're doing my brother-in-law named it. It's the International Diaspora of Loggers Exhibition, or IDLE. And it's like eventually going to be a 32 bracket, like macro brews from around the world, traditional lager pilsner only,
Ooh.
no microbreweries, the kind of beer that like started in Germany and is now everywhere.
Yeah, I'm into that.
If you follow me on Instagram, I'm making it a highlight. So stories highlight, so you can follow the whole thing from the
Are
beginning if you want to.
are you including like Hells?
We already did Germany and we didn't specifically get any Hell's lagers,
All right.
but we did do 7 German lagers for the play-in round.
And you're doing Pilsners too.
Yeah, because like most of the Czech ones are Pilsner, and so it's kind of if you try and cut that off, and honestly, you can go head to head with these macro versions of lagers and Pilsners, and you can't tell the difference. So at a craft brewery, maybe you're like, oh, this is a little skunkier or something,
I
but
feel like you get more metallicness in the Pilsners a lot of
more
times.
metals.
Yeah.
More metal.
I like it.
All right, Trip. What are we doing now? You want
I'm
to
gonna
talk
hit
about the
record.
book?
I'm gonna hit
Okay.
record. All right. Hello, everybody. This is Trip. I'm with Dan and Dustin, and this is a happy hour. And while it is 10:10 for me in Scotland, it is not for them on the West Coast.
Yeah, you bring us into weird timing of things.
I'm sorry, but I really feel like
I'm still overseeing like my children's distance learning right now.
well, and I waited to start drinking until 10:10 because sometimes I don't before certain live streams and things
Yeah,
got changed directions.
Last time we did this, you were like 3 drinks ahead of me, and it was just like at a party. That's not fun. Also not fun in an interview format.
Well, I want you to know it was great for downloads.
It was also fucking heavily edited. So
Yeah.
let's just say, let's put those two things next to each other at least. Yeah, I don't think I will have drank this much between the hours of 2 and 4 p.m. since vacation 2 weeks ago. So it's really been a while, you know?
Well, I'm really glad that you're trying to sacrifice for your friend and all.
Yeah, just thank my wife for taking care of our son today. That's the sacrifice.
Joffrey's a winner.
Jeff is a winner, yeah.
So yeah, what do you want to say things or what? Like, I mean, I don't.
Well, so I think I'm going to lead. I guess I'll take the lead for the first 40 minutes or so as we talk about the book. But then I think you have a slew of questions that we can kind of go through willy-nilly for the remaining time. So
yeah, I'm not going to
lead because you're the responsible one out of the three of us.
Yeah,
because Trip asked me to actually, but yeah. You know.
I said we have to talk about the book first because when we're done, then I'm switching to bourbon. And
Ah.
that way I'm in the mood to ask you your questions.
Also, I think last time, ostensibly, you were interviewing me, and within 10 minutes, I had just taken control and started interviewing you because it was so sloppy and non-directive, non-directional. So, learning from my
Omnidirectional.
mistakes. Learning from
Omnidirectional.
my mistakes. All right. It was omnidirectional, like the luring love of God. There we go.
Did
Okay.
he just start echoing to you?
Yeah, what's going on? Why am I echoing?
No, not to
Now
me.
it's gone.
It's fine.
Nope. I'm echoing. Weird. I don't know. Now it's gone.
Maybe Trip is broadcasting you.
I don't know. I think I'm good now.
Now you're echoing.
Now I'm echoing.
Well, you did for a second. Zoom. What the hell?
All three of my kids make Zoom calls too. So
You know what? At least we don't have visitors to our message board.
There is definitely an echo. Now there isn't. Okay.
many echoes.
Well, we'll just, you know what? I'm going to record my audio, and that way, just in case you've got it without echo or whatever. Why don't we all just do that? And then we're safe on that front. Okay. So, Trip, the book is called Divine Self-Investment. It is your, really, I guess it's like a systematic theology, but with a particular Christological focus. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, so systematic theology tends to have like 7 different topics, and this one's focused on Christology.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, cool. I wouldn't have called it a systematic, but then I saw John Cobb's little review blurb, and I thought, well, if Cobb calls it systematic theology, then I'm going to defer to him. But basically, you're talking about, as I understand it, you're trying to thread a needle, draw 2 sides of a debate sort of toward each other, at least as a sort of a first step. And you're basically saying, look, we're taking the criticism seriously, like a critical liberal approach to Christ and to historical Jesus studies and to basic theology problems of conceiving of God in a secular age. But we're also taking this confessional, really kind of piety based personal faith side of theology seriously and trying to wed those, which, as I understand it, is basically your whole project in a nutshell. You're just also describing this book as along the same lines. Am I getting that right as well?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy with that.
Believing skeptics is a term you like to use, right? So, okay, let's talk a little bit. I want to motivate this because I know a lot of your listeners might not care so much about this question, but it's helpful for me, which is what is the motivation for having a Christology? And let me just say why I feel that way sometimes. I often find myself thinking, this world is so damn complicated. Truth is so elusive. There's so many different angles. There's so many things to consider, right? Now I'm not only going to say I'm living in the Christian tradition, I'm going to say I have ideas about specifically how Jesus is the Christ. So from a removed perspective, that sounds like a fool's errand. Like, how could I possibly get confident enough about any of these claims for it to be worth my time? So that's my devil's advocate, and I'd like to hear you respond.
Well, and I'll add, I second that to a degree, and I'm curious how much. I guess I want to go get underneath like why this project is important to you. Personally.
That's good. Human element.
Well, follow up the important question after I just say, I think one of the tasks of like Christian theologians are helping the church understand the content of its confession, right? And you both have podcasts full of people who don't want to use the word Christian anymore because either the content they were given sucked balls, or they were told to believe stupid things, or they were like, it's a mystery, it's all great. or they're like evidence demands a verdict and all this kind of stuff. So for me, like being a Christian theologian, like how I understand my vocation is helping to enrich the critical reflection on the life of the body of Christ. And when the body of Christ can't talk about God and can't talk about how God was present in Christ and what God's doing in the body of Christ, then I think we end up getting to situations where we draw boundaries around communities in ways that are ultimately harming the kind of humming mystery that resonates within it. And so, what I wanted to do in the book is simultaneously be honest and upfront and engage the criticisms that have kept most more progressive or liberal theologians from saying much that sounds like traditional Christology, right? They hesitate to the Jesus as the Christ, or, well, the poetics refer to the Christ event, or these kind of deflationary or distancing statements. So I have like each of the main chapters has a conversation partner of someone who deflates the meaning of theology in one way from a metaphysically rich way, at least from my perspective, and then uses an open and relational theologian who engages the same element with metaphysical gumption. And then it works with these dialogues. And underneath it is, I think overwhelming majority of people, when you say like, I believe in God, they think of ultimate reality of some sort, like the source of existence, meaning, beauty, goodness, truth, and things. And a lot of theologians, basically after Kant ruined theology that wasn't fundamentalist, have talked about something less than, God. And so to me, it was like, what would I do if I took seriously the experience with God mediated by Jesus that I've had as a person of faith in the community, and the questions like pluralism, historical Jesus, problems with violence and power and atonement, and all those things, and then engage the tradition again? Like, what would happen?
And
And
all in 250 slim pages, by the way.
well, there was another 22,000 words that I just didn't think people would finish the book.
I think that's a fair assumption these
Like,
days,
I want
honestly.
people to finish a book. Like, I like the last two chapters are the payoff. And so I want you to get to the part that talks about God is even in need of salvation. Like, what happens if someone only reads the first three chapters and they're like, this is tame, Trip. But if you
What
get to the
happens if like me, they've only read the introduction to write their questions?
oh, well then,
I
you
just
know,
read part of the last chapter.
see,
Oh, good.
start with the last
Dustin can
chapter
fill
again.
in some
I heard it
gaps.
was your favorite, so
Yeah,
I was trying to read it all today, but I got sucked
It's
in.
quite common for me to only read the introduction and sometimes the end to get a sense of what I want to ask people. So, okay, that makes sense. And in that sense, your project and my project overall are quite similar, quite resonant, of course, at different levels of sophistication, yours being much higher. Um, I, I I apologize now if people are tired of or burnt out on the um, Charles Taylor, A Secular Age thesis. But after having interviewed your buddy Tony Jones a couple weeks ago, that's kind of where my head is at the last few weeks. And so that's my context for thinking about this project and a lot of other stuff over the last few weeks. So I guess I want to kind of reiterate something you said in that language and see what you think about it. So if this were 500 years ago and you were writing a piece on Christology and you were one of the few landed gentry, or child of a landed gentry family that you could go, one of the 1% who could go to school and become a theologian, whatever you then wrote about Christology would sort of, in some sense, trickle down to the entire culture, right? Because the church is basically in charge. The only educated people are basically clergy, in the West anyway. And now in this sort of secular age that we find ourselves in, that's no longer true. So theology is no longer the queen of the sciences, as we have heard so many times. And instead, and you have a little thing in your book about like, it's no longer for everyone. It's now for some people, but not everybody. And the more deep and detailed you get, the fewer people it's for, right? It's for like people who go to seminary and maybe who become pastors or ministers or priests, right? So in one sense, there's this diminishment of, I don't know, I guess the power, the sort of influence of a work like this, of a book like this. But on the other hand, we might ask ourselves, first of all, who really cared about this back when Christianity was, you know, back during proper Christendom? Like, how many people were really following Christ? And we could turn to something like the work of Kierkegaard to sharpen our critique, or Germany 1933, whichever direction you want to go. Uh, and at the same time, there are still people living today who are Christians, who go to church, who have a life of faith, who have had an experience of God in the context of a Christian community, like the three of us have had. And so, in that sense, it's of course still totally worth it to think through and work through these questions, right? Because it's not for nobody, but I don't know, like that's just, there's a tension in my mind about this stuff of like, where ought I place the kind of work that I do? You know, and like, oh, maybe it's actually for fewer people than I thought it was. And am I okay with that? And can my ego handle that? And can I still feel like that's a good use of my time? So this is, I guess, not a question about you, but more of a confession about me.
Well,
Well,
one
go ahead,
thing
Dustin.
is just that I feel like he was kind of hitting at that is that if no one is doing this work,
Right.
then I think it's easier to see the repercussions if you imagine no one doing it, right? It's
Exactly.
for some reason it's harder to realize, to see it moving through, even though it's slow or whatever. It's harder to see in a positive effect, but you can imagine it much easier in a negative way and say, if no one does this work, where does it lead? Where does it go? And
Liberty
that's
University, Dustin. That's the answer. Trip, what were you going to say?
So three things popped in my mind. One, like, I mean, I started the podcast in 2008. So since then, like, it's grown and things. So that there's like, 40 or 50,000 people that will listen to me each month at some point. And so I think that means they aren't all professional theologians.
Sure,
And
for sure.
so
Yeah.
this book uh, is engaging people. Most of them have met before if they listen regularly. And I try to, on the podcast, uh, give the gifts of the academy back to the people, because it's not 500 years ago. Because 500 years ago, the people who had the experience, the rich encounters across difference, were people that left their feudal space, right? And you're more likely to have the intellectual challenges if you're in a monastery than if you're not. But now the intellectual challenges to the faith go to middle school Bible teachers, right? I was a youth minister for 18 years. If I could still be allowed to be one, I would. My son, not a fan of me staying a youth minister, but I'm happy to volunteer for lock-ins. Like, but I think that the questions that the intellectual elite, you could say, years ago have, are now ones more and more people have. Then they're asking those questions in a context where they aren't in a community with a shared meta narrative or a sacred canopy, like Peter Berger talks about. And there's something connected to the Charles Taylor piece you mentioned. And so one of the challenges of this cross-pressured nature of religion that Charles Taylor talks about in Secular Age. And what he really means is, like, all of us get a symbol system, right? When you're born into the world, as you learn to talk, you then receive the world interpreted through the ideologies and assumptions of the language you're given. But
Right.
that's not a negative thing. That's also like how every human has ever done it since they talked, right? So, but it does come with baggage. Now, when that language you're given, where how you first learn to say, I love you, mom, and God loves my neighbor, and I'm trying to do that, or whatever. When that all gets problematized because you have people sharing, right, the same sacred canopy, the same symbolic structures, and then you ask those intellectual questions that come to challenge that language, it problematizes the finality of it. And that challenge that used to exist in the academy a couple hundred years ago now exists on every street, where you have multiple different religious traditions there, people that are having a rich, full life without religious engagement, and this type of thing. And one of the responses to the stewards of culture has either been to isolate, where you have this like hardcore Christian, we replicate everything in culture so we can have it response, or the assimilate response, where we're like the Jesus flavored morals on the top of being a high quality civic participant. And my response is, well, if I'm just a civic participant, I will sleep in, watch the NFL, and be a member of Greenpeace. And if it's a cloistered, annoying, like right wing response, I'm just like, nah, because we know what the Benedict option is. It's sucker punching a protester after Trump gives his speech.
Shit.
It was Rob Dreyer did the the
Yep.
piece sticking
Rod
up for
Dreher, but he defended Metaxas. Yeah, I got it. Yep.
Yeah, I know you did. I was making sure everyone else caught the joke. I was trying to, just make sure I brought it up. Anyway,
get a little
like
jab in there at Dreher and Metaxas. I get it. Yeah, good.
Yeah. But if those aren't the only options, then, or if those are the only options, then I'm like not interested.
Right.
And so for me, then the question of, is Jesus Lord, right? Or am I a disciple of Jesus? What does that even mean in this context? Who is Jesus Christ for us today is a new question. And I don't think it's one where you either get rid of the uniqueness, right, and assimilate, or like you grab the tradition and everything within it and cloister off.
Or become an apologist, basically, right?
Yeah. Like, and so the one of the language I use, and I don't remember where this is in the book or not, but Paul Ricoeur used the language of a post-religious age of faith. And I find that really helpful, right? And so the post-religious thing, and this is in his engagement back and forth with Charles Taylor, is like you would not call our age religious in the sense that the age doesn't share a religion. Like there's all sorts of spiritualities and religions and everything in between, right? Like how many of our friends used to have quiet times every day, think religion is crazy, but play with tarot cards, right? Like there's so many ways it all shows back up in all these different spaces. But what Taylor and what Paul Ricoeur are getting at is that in a post-religious context, faith plays a different role. Faith is not faith ultimately in God and their truth regime that shelters you and gives you meaning, purpose, and value. Faith is actually what calls you out of the ideologies that frame and wrap your world, right? And so like faith sets you at odds with the dominant regime. And later in the book, I'll point how that shows up in culture and in the economy and all other sorts of things, where the task of discipleship sets you against different ideologies. But that post-religious age for faith, then the question for me is like, what does that faith look like? And I think for Christians, it means you still have to figure out, are you even going to say things like Jesus is the Christ or whatever?
Yeah. So I guess one of these areas where you get into some of this conflict is around historical Jesus research and the historical Jesus program. And you have a line about how Jesus of Nazareth being the Christ is not like only a freshly contested claim. It's been contested since it came out. But sort of along that sort of Taylor line, I feel like it's been contested for different reasons, right? So before the Enlightenment scientific age, it was contested maybe if you were someone from another faith, or if you were someone from within the Christian faith that had a different theology and you're vying for power and influence, or having a genuine disagreement, right? But now that's not the primary way that it's contested. It's like the whole question itself being valid is generally how it's contested, right? And so I just wonder if you have anything to say about just expanding upon that contested over time thing.
Yeah. Okay. So two responses. One is, and this is nerdy, so we don't talk about this right now, other than just to say one of the larger arguments in the book is that most liberal theologies assume God is the God of the philosophers not just in the way they think about how God acts in the world or how God relates in the world, but even if they say Jesus is the Christ, God is not thematized by how God reveals God's self in Jesus. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah,
like
but
that.
I actually kind of do want to talk about that. So maybe give your
Oh,
other
okay.
response
Okay.
first.
So my book is what happens if liberal theologians who would not speak much metaphysically about God actually have their God thematized by what they end up saying about Jesus. And I do it in an open and relational theological context. So and that to me is this okay. So like people know, like Pete Rollins and I were roommates, and we're good friends and stuff. I remember he and I were having a conversation one time. He's like, "So you really believe these things, right?" Like, continuously shocked. And my response was like, "Why do I can completely imagine not believing certain things. I just think I would not be a minister anymore." Right? Like there's like clearly a point where I don't baptize you in the name of the creator, redeemer, and sustainer. And I don't
Right.
like say, this is my body. Right. And so in some sense, back to that question Dustin asked earlier, this book was me wrestling since the time I felt a call to ministry. Like, do I even know what it is I give allegiance to? And can I really give myself to it? And from the time I kind of came back to faith after my post-structuralist wanderings as a philosophy major and such, it was the love of enemy at the heart of Jesus' teaching, and then Jesus from the cross saying, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." And in one sense, us not knowing what we do is the most obviously true yet beautiful thing. Like that the innocent person who has embodied, articulated, and made present the reign of the kingdom of God, right, dies and then says, "Forgive them. They don't know what they're doing." Like, that's an honest depiction about us. I try to think that way, right? I obviously didn't and made them a taxist joke. But that's what I would like to do, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's what I wanted. And so I think like that's so beautiful. If anything's going to be true, that should be true. And if it's not true, I'll at least live into it, right? And so out of that came all my graduate studies and things and the
Okay, but
podcast.
there's
So
still a
this
little
book is
leap
like
there.
the book is the kind of like what Tripp really thinks about
Yeah.
God, kind of
Right, which is
in light
great.
of Christ.
But there is a little bit of a leap there, right? So I'm very familiar with the little Pascal's Wager move you did, because I say it all the time of like, look, if I got to live as if something's true, and this is the one I'm going to live as if it's true for a number of reasons. But that's still, you still have to then go, and I will engage at face value with its theological and speculative tradition, right? And then plant my flag here, because I can
Yeah,
imagine
well,
someone being a minister and not wanting to do that. So you could
okay,
still
well,
say,
I
I
would just
want to
say
baptize you, I want to give communion, etc.
it's not Pascal's wager, because his wager is
I
based
know,
on one's like eternal destiny.
I know, I know.
I'm
Pascal's
still not
Wager
sure about
light.
that. So just but the wager is actually I think the actual wager of the existential register that I talk about in the book. Right. And so I make a joke that who knows how jokes come across in theology books. They came across better in
I
the
haven't
first
guessed.
book. But you know how the historical Jesus has movement has had these different dominant pictures of the historical Jesus. So the Jesus seminar has Jesus as a wandering cynic sage, and then like Bart Ehrman and company is like a apocalyptic Jewish prophet, and NT writes like, well, after he read Second Enoch, he knew he was the second person of the Trinity, or whatever. Like, so in the Gospels, synoptics, when Jesus says, "Who do the people say I am?" Right? And they give answers to Jesus, like John the Baptist come back, like head reattached, or Elijah, going through these answers that are like completely reasonable answers if you're thinking he's doing crazy stuff, speaking hot game, has some authority that most teachers don't have, right? Like what makes sense of this? And then he says, well, who do you say I am? Then Peter says, you are the Christ, Son of the living God. After that, it's not like Jesus goes, thanks, Pete. That is the evidence that demands the verdict. Finally, someone has pieced together the Hebrew scriptures and knows that my anticipatory blood rolled right through it, right up, especially Isaiah 53:5, because I love Stryper in the future, and it is all about me, right? Like he doesn't say that. He says, my Father in heaven revealed this to you, right? And so the New Testament picture of faith in the Gospels of the disciples is one where they give themselves to Jesus and they don't even know exactly what it means to be the Christ yet. But they identify it not because it's demanded, but because it's elicited, it's lured, it's called out of them by God, right? It's the Heavenly Father revealed. So it's not like the other people were wrong, right? So Jesus as the Christ is not like a math equation where you get it right or wrong. It's more like a love poem. And so that like fuzziness you have, I actually think is real important. Because I don't like meet people of other religious traditions or no religious traditions and look at them and go, I've written 2 books about Jesus. And if you just read them, right? But if they ask me about what animates and motivates me, I have no problem telling the story of Jesus, how it's impacted my life and how it's impacted the people around me and inspires me. And like my office mate, Omar, is Muslim and we can talk about our faiths. And I'm not like threatened and in a competitive relationship. Like, and part of the book is like, how can I affirm the deepness and particularity of what's humming within me in that space without denying its presence in another space? Because I experience the resonance when with people in other faiths in certain situations, right? So I think Christology, and in the book I say, is a disciple's discipline. That it's only after you call Jesus the Christ do you want to know what the confession means. But if you haven't had that existential response, if you haven't given yourself to this way of being in the world, then to want to know what it means is to miss the way you discover it, right? Like if you went up to Joffrey after your 3rd date and you're like, I'm really into you. Could you tell me what things are going to be like in our 15th year of marriage? Like she's going to look at you and be like, that's creepy. Right.
We're breaking up. Right.
Yeah.
This is going nowhere. Right.
But I feel like that's like a lot of times what people think of when you're talking about Christology, when it's this abstracted, it's divorced from the enfleshed community where it happens. And so the existential register that I talk about in the book is that you don't really know the content of the faith until you're in a community of practice. And I don't give this example in the book because you don't put these in academic books, but when I was facilitating confirmation classes with teenagers, like, high schoolers, and eventually with their parents, like I rewrote the curriculum. It was all based on practices of Jesus. So, and you would do one for a month, right? So like take praying for your enemy. At the beginning of confirmation, I always say, like, what are your big God questions? And someone's like, well, does God put Gandhi in hell? Or, something like that, right? Well, guess what? After you've prayed for your enemies for a month, you don't ask that question. Why? Because you prayed for your enemies for a month and Jesus told you, and you figure God can't be more of a dick than the Son, right? And so like communities of practice shape our theology. So what I want to do, what I'm doing in the book is saying, like, to understand what's going on Christologically it's a disciples discipline. So it's not Christology from below, which is what post-enlightenment thinkers that dealt with historical Jesus try to do, build up from the historical Jesus and then justify as much as they can, or Christology from above, people like Karl Barth and company, ones that gave priority to God's self-revelation and forget that all revelations historicized, contextualized, and such. But Christology actually comes from within a community that confesses Jesus as the Christ. That's the space that happens. And then you ask the questions that you carry and stuff. But anyway.
No, it's good. That's good. Dustin, you want to hop in here?
Um, yeah, I'm curious about the way that you think about the differences between, like, you're talking about this is your confession, your community, specifically. How much? I don't even know how to ask what I'm trying to get at. Basically, you were talking about. I guess maybe if I'm correct me if I'm wrong here, but you're saying this is the thing that has energized me, that has connected with me. This is the language and community and tradition that it's come through, and because of that, I care about where that theology continues to be built and where it leads, and not necessarily, um, I guess, a larger issue of like, is this somehow objectively true and can I prove it?
Well, so I guess I wouldn't want to use the language of objectively true,
Mhm.
just because, uh, not because I don't think what I'm getting at is descriptive of God as God was present in Christ and in the Christian community, but because objectively true is kind of saddled with this weird division that I think's bad for religion of separating subjectivity and objectivity.
Mhm.
Like, it's objectively true, right, that I love Alicia, and it doesn't make sense without the subjective element. Um, and like, I could tell you everything about our relationship and not think you're going to like hit on her, right?
Mhm.
Like, my the objective description doesn't necessitate, like, you can recognize it without it necessitating the same response from you. And so, like, in one sense, like, that's how I want to articulate the situated nature of any finite being talking about the ultimate. That also means I know people whose experience in the church is filled with such pain, shame, and trauma that I could never imagine them seeing the way I string together words that they used to sing in songs connected to with repressing their own identity or
Mhm.
covering over their experience. Like, I don't expect it to be universal, right? Um, I have had the same experience of people going like, a friend of mine who after my last Jesus book said, I wish I had met the Jesus you did,
Mhm.
but I will never get into church again, was her response to me. And I, knowing her story, I get it, right? Like, so I don't want to say objective in that sense, but if you're saying to me, is there traction between ultimate reality and the one encountered in Christ, then I want to say yes.
Mhm.
Like, it's not like, theology is not bracketing the metaphysical register. It's just all God talk is situated and contextual and the function of a finite being. That's not a deflationary statement. If you just, it's an honest one. And guess what? If you're a Christian, God was invested in the cosmos for 13.8 billion years to bring about human beings. Think of how long the universe was out without love poems. Do you want to minimize the fact that we have love poems, or that parents mourn when their kids are hurt and sad, or that friends can say, I'm sorry, right? Like, there's so many things that are all so human that if you just look at the big cosmic story, are beautiful things worth celebrating. If, like, as open and relational theologian, like, God was invested in those experiences emerging, and it participates in them. And so like, I think there is this sadness that I didn't have. So, like, I know both of you had more kind of distinctively conservative experiences than me, but but because of the podcast, I've met individuals who are genuinely sad when, like, rigid certainty wasn't an option. And that is sad. Now, if you, I've never like had that deep desire for it. And in a sense, like if you were super duper certain, it would creep me out, and I probably am not listening. That minister who you had in middle school who's like, we don't ask questions because we're Christians and have the Bible. Like, that was the one I didn't like. And I'm like, what? Are you sure? Because my dad's the senior minister and I get like praised for a high quality question. Have you read Paul Tillich's sermons? Like, that was Tripp's experience, right? So I know there are a lot of people like mourn that certainty thing, but that's why that like resisting the objectively true things there. I think a lot of people in that whole process of I'm deconstructing, can I reconstruct, or whatever's getting itself done in that language. And as a professional philosopher, not always comfortable the way deconstruction gets appropriated that context. And Jack Caputo's sitting on my shoulder, very disturbed. But whatever's getting itself done in that language, which Jack would like that language, right? Is people who've been blessed and cursed by a tradition, and they don't know who they are without the blessing, but they'd like to discover who they are when they've been healed through the cursing.
Yeah.
And that means the subjective experience of the same person who said, like, oh, you're a filthy sinner because like a bunch of middle school boys are like trying to see how long they can go without masturbating, is also the same guy, right? Who, like, when their parents like ground them because they cheated on some test or whatever, or they like kissed their boyfriend's girlfriend or whatever, like is able to sit there and facilitate the weird, awkward middle school moment, and friends reconcile, or they sit down with them and help them apologize to their parents, and their parents are shocked and like affirm them. Like, the same person does both those things. And like, so many times we chuck all of it because of, the worst part, and then go, well, that's not true. And I don't think truth is clear, wonderfully clear. And I think if it's abstracted, then or objectified or concretized, then it's a problematic. It's problematic for me. But the in the book in chapter 5, that whole thing gets intensified in when I talk about the Han of God, and this is a concept in uh, Korean theology. Well, it's a Korean concept that Korean theologians have used to look at the way sin, shame, these type of like that sin is not just the guilt you have about things, it's also the inertia, the shame, the trajectories of pain that get internalized even generation to generation. And like, what do you call these deep wounds in a people, in a culture, and or in a person who is a victim? And in Grace G. Sun Kim, who's been on the podcast, has talked about this before. Andrew Sung Park, who is a dialogue partner in there, who's been on the podcast before, talks about it. And it, to me, that concept really struck me. And in the book, I explore it to say, like, it's as in an open relational context, it's not just us who has Han, right? When you realize you have Han, that there's this problem, that's not things you're guilty for. It is what other people have done to you, or things you've inherited, or trajectories that you weren't a part of actualizing in your agency, and yet they name you and claim you and determine too much of you, and you feel this deep like pain and dread. That concept. Andrew Sung Park does this beautiful book where he looks through scripture and goes, like, God was actually more invested in Han, as Koreans talk about it, than sin in the Western sense, guilt, right? And he goes, think of how many people walk into your congregations and then they go, what's wrong? And you tell a story, but you aren't going to tell it all yet. You're not going to be honest. You don't know if you trust them. And then the trajectory of salvation we have in our head is what did they do wrong? Because we know what to do once we know what they did wrong.
Yeah. Do you have unconfessed sin in your life?
And then we have sin. Okay, now we have a story to tell you.
Right,
And
exactly.
Han becomes, there's this beautiful theological literature that comes out of the Korean church, who the Korean community had been experiencing Han being this particular people between large nations, right? And always going through these different patterns. So they explored that concept and then read the scriptures and look at how the Hebrew people were a consistently oppressed group, right? And then they look at it and go, there's actually a whole story of salvation for those who carry shame, those who are sinned against. Why does Billy Graham only tell one story? Was Andrew Sung Park's question. Because what happens if you have to stick your shame and your pain in a salvation story built for the guilty is violence. If you have to convince yourself you are responsible for being the victim, then it's not salvation. It is Jesus nailing you to the cross of someone else has already put you on, right? Now, I would not, this doesn't come preachy in a textbook, a theology book, but underneath that, the whole section in open relational theology, God knows Han. God does not just reconcile victim and violator. God is the victim. And the Han of creation is internalized into the divine life. And then for me, the question is, how do you understand the God who gives God's self to the world in Christ in light of Han? And anyway, then we have to go in like that whole section. But underneath it is this. I encountered and could stay in the church because it was the church that told me there was a story bigger than guilt, and that my own experience of being violated and shamed was not forced to be in a sin and forgiveness narrative. And I didn't experience that framing of it in hyper masculine version of men and dominant culture. I didn't experience it in most our Christian don't true love waits retreats, but there was one old lady that volunteered at the youth group who made it clear to me. And that was the most life-giving moment I had in my coming of age. And it was in the context of Christ affirmation that you're a new creation in Christ. Anyway, so like that chapter, like if you're asking like where they come from, was I wanted to tell a Christology that was at least as beautiful as the Christ I've encountered in the church. And it's one that thinks the gospel has to be good for victim and violator alike. And as an open relational theologian, that means God does not give salvation until all are included in it. Anyway.
My thought on Han versus guilt is that Han makes a lot more sense of the type of people Jesus chose to hang out with than guilt does, right? Like basically tax collectors, prostitutes, other undesirables are saddled with their own culture's version of that, right? Of that deep shame, that character level shame, not just performance based missing the mark type of language.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people read it that way though.
No, they should, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. But they read it as those people have the most of this classical sense.
They've missed the mark the most.
The
right?
most.
Yeah.
And it's just not the way that you watch Jesus' compassion go out to them. Like,
right. Well, and that's why it's cool to have a Korean church in an Eastern tradition bring that up, because, you know, Jesus lived in an ancient Near Eastern culture, which was probably closer to the last few hundred years of the East than the last few hundred years of the West in terms of its cultural assumptions, the way that guilt and shame were used, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I think that's interesting too, in the sense that I think when there's no extricating Han and a classical sense of sin from each other. Like, you know, we absolutely, one affects the other, and so often, you know, people are in a situation where people would look at them and say, "Oh, look at their sin," and with zero compassion and zero understanding of this idea of Han that is affecting every single person all the time. All of the things that have happened to you have been laid on you with zero fault of your own. And I think for me, that goes back to this idea. I always forget who actually said this or if anyone even knows, but to understand perfectly is to forgive perfectly, something like that. And just that idea of if you could actually get to the bottom of
Right.
what's going on in someone, you would have so much more compassion for what's going through, and that ties back to Trip what you were saying about the way that actually living certain things out affects your theology, living in certain communities. For me, like being a father has been a huge one that I've said, oh, if I'm like this on
Yeah.
my best day, then God is definitely better than that. um,
Yeah.
and
And that's
that has
quite
to shape,
common, actually.
that
Right.
has to
Right.
shape what I think of God.
Yeah. Not to, we don't need to pivot to universalism, but this idea of understanding, completely or whatever that was essentially my initial reasoning 15 years ago for becoming a universalist was like, if all our impediments, all the ways we've been sinned against, all our pain, our shit personal narratives, if all that were controlled for and not a part of our decision making process, and then we saw God purely for who God is, nobody would ever say no to that. The only reason that we say no to the good, the true, and the beautiful, hashtag carry the fire pod, the only reason that we say no to those things, and maybe we should start moving toward more drinks and weirder questions here because that's cropping up now naturally, uh, is that like if we could do that, we would all say yes to God, right? So that's just a related thing, and that must be how God sees us, and so that's how we should try to see each other. And it's all
Yeah, well,
not
especially in
connected.
an open relational framing, because God is actually experientially connected to our
Yeah,
personal.
yeah. All right, Trip. Well, maybe this is a good time. We're at the about the 1 hour mark here on our own clocks. Maybe we transition to you pouring yourself a strong bourbon and Coca-Cola drink.
Well, I did just put my fourth beer in
Oh,
my glass, but
that's fine
um,
too.
I
I
was
don't. You do you, man. In terms of what you told me that you were going to transition to bourbon when we switched questions.
oh, I
Y-
know. Well, I wanted to tell you one thing I just thought of.
About
Um,
about your book.
well, no, what you were saying. Well,
Yeah, go
if you
ahead.
want,
No,
well, other than
the joke was going to be, what kind of guy who knows that the transition is supposed to be a drink change after talking nearly unbrokenly about his book for 50 minutes or so, pours a fourth beer and doesn't transition. You know what I mean? It was an
well,
ego joke, but go ahead.
I is probably accurate.
Ooh, maybe I
Oh,
can milk one more beer's worth of questions about divine
yeah.
self-investment out of these guys.
Well, no, that was the thing. I was like going to say the title's called Divine Self-Investment.
I said that at the
And
beginning.
oh, but
Oh, but
here,
you're okay.
but
Yeah.
I didn't say why it's called Divine Self-Investment.
People are going to have
So,
to wait for the U. Well, they were going to have to wait for the U permission interview when I was
oh
going
yeah,
to ask you that,
well,
but
and you know
give
what?
it now. Give
No,
it
no,
now.
they have to wait. And you know what? I might not even say it in that interview. I might talk to him and then have a 5 minute answer that's just for the Patreon members of Dan Cooks. You have permission.
Hey,
Um,
if you want to know about the title, it's behind the paywall.
yeah, or you can hear me talk about Schleiermacher for an hour. The no, no, this is the other part of it was when you were talking to him about when y'all were talking about the way those questions kind of show up and the universalism one. I was like, whatever seventh grade is, right? Um and I brought something up with my dad, and he was like, yeah, but how do you know that someone said at some youth retreat, right? And he goes, yeah, but how do you know you can't respond to God's love after you die? And I was like, what do you mean? And he goes, now how do you know that? And I was like, well, it's in the Bible. He's like, is it?
Back.
And I read the whole Bible over 3 or 4 months, basically looking for that one question. And after that, I was so I was just like, I'm not trusting these people. That was when I like started reading books, and wanting to have books and things. So like in seventh grade or whatever, I got into like read most of the C.S. Lewis books, and then got into Paul Tillich and Bonhoeffer and Kierkegaard and all that kind of thing.
As one does in junior high. Yep.
Well, Kierkegaard, and that was definitely high school.
Okay.
Like,
Okay. Yeah.
like if Kierkegaard was a band, he'd be an emo band.
That is
Yeah.
100% true, at least in my own experience. I discovered Kierkegaard as I was knee deep in emo, and
Okay,
and at least ankle deep in Dustin's band Thrice at that time. But I was, if I had to choose what was like most central to my heart in my Kierkegaard days, it was like Further Seems Forever, fucking just early Noise Ratchet, like really indie emo stuff. And that's when I found the journals of Kierkegaard, and I was
uh-huh.
19 in college, and I was
Oh
just
hell
like,
yeah.
it was like, open the gates for me, Lord. I found it.
Okay, so um uh fun
Transitioning. Oh,
when
okay.
Dustin the other day had uh Foreman on his podcast, uh lead singer, songwriter and stuff for Switchfoot.
Switchfoot. Yeah.
Um so y'all are talking. So our band opened for them one time when they played at the school. I was like so it's not like we were opening for them. It's more like we were probably forced to open for them.
Right.
So
Yeah.
like, but if I weren't talking to professional musicians, I would totally tell that story as if it was chosen. But nonetheless, like
Yeah.
before it, we're like doing sound check, and this is like before they were ever in that Walk to Remember movie and blew up or whatever.
I don't think
Um,
that's why they blew up, by the way. Is
it
it
wasn't
Walker? They had like
Dare You to
legitimate
Move.
rock.
It was
Yeah,
like
but
it was a what is that called? The inflection moment,
I'm sure it helped.
inflection point.
That's true. But then the next record had like three,
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
alternative top five songs or
this was
whatever on
like
it.
right before, like it was just like maybe Learning to Breathe was out, but not
Yeah.
but they were mostly playing like all my favorite songs like Bomb and stuff like that. The first album.
Chem GA, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Or is it
that's
six
so
A?
good.
I never really
But anyway,
knew.
before that, like I'm a philosophy major, and he said something like during sound check. He's like, "Oh, well, was that a Kierkegaard quote?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, I've really been getting into Kierkegaard," and he said some things about Kierkegaard, and I was like, "Well, that's not actually right." And my brother just like punches me. He's our bass player, punches me in the arm, right? And it's just like,
Uh-huh.
oh my God, Trip. He's like this to everyone. And
Probably true.
yeah, no, and I had forgot about that till you were talking to him, and I was like, I remember this one time I was 21 years old and was a complete D to him about Kierkegaard. And I think more songwriters should listen to Kierkegaard. And
Mm-hmm.
pronounces
So you said
August.
you had some good questions for
Oh
us.
yeah.
Let's we can start even though you're still on the beer. We can still transition. I think we need a question for Dustin because you've done the most talking, Trip. I've done the second most. Dustin has done the least. So let's
Well,
get
the first
a
one's
good
a fun
question.
one, but
I
it's
feel
a
like
tag.
I do the least amount of talking of anyone who has a podcast.
Maybe a virtue.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. It's what I'm good at. I can listen.
Mhm.
Well, Dustin, y'all here. One of the questions that was sent in said that Dustin and Dan are in charge of a uh, a festival. You have 7 slots at the festival for the most 30-year-olds going crazy and getting hardcore rocking out style, right? So you're going for your peers. You get 7 bands, and
Whether they're currently
I'm,
playing together or
you
disbanded,
can yeah.
I'm turning 40, so I don't know if the 30-year-olds are.
whatever. The audience is
You get what I'm
30 to
talking about.
42. Okay, that's what
Yeah.
we're gonna say. That's the age
All right.
bracket. Okay.
30 to 42-year-olds. You have 7 bands, and but y'all have to agree on it. you know.
Okay.
Let's take the agreement part loosely. I'm going to throw right away Rage Against the Machine because there's still a lot
Oh
of
yeah.
demand. They've only really played like 2 shows, right? They played a couple festivals, that's it.
Well, then, yeah, COVID happened.
And then COVID. So there, because of COVID, Rage, I think, is on the lineup.
Okay.
Because you got to go for like pretty wide appeal here. We're not.
Well, that
I would
Dewey,
want to say Refused, which is
that's
the
what I'm
T-shirt
saying.
you're wearing.
I don't.
Like Refused is my number one. That is one of the greatest shows I ever went to in my entire life. Was when they reunited at Coachella, and then the next show they played was at the Warfield in San Francisco, and I flew home to visit my family and see them at the Warfield, and it was complete, paradise rock show. But then they did like 3 more tours, so I don't know that they can. And how big was their fan base to begin with, right?
Yeah, you're getting this. This is a hard question because
It's hard.
like what came to my mind
Yeah,
was Gorilla Biscuits, but no one knows.
I don't even know who that is.
Oh, it's so good. But they came back. They came through.
I have one that I have a little counterfactual at the drive-in, but they didn't just come back for the money, making a shitty record and not moving around on stage like they used to. So if I could get real at the drive-in with the fucking crazy legs and the throwing the guitars all around, and they didn't make a record, they just did that, then that's on the 7-band list for me. But I was like, I almost bought those $75 tickets to At the Drive-In, but I was smart about it. And I thought, I'm going to see some videos from the same tour. And I'm going to see if Omar is just standing there or if he's doing his salsa thing. And he was just standing there. Let me tell you that. And I didn't go. And I do not regret that decision.
All right. I have no comment on that. But
the beers are working. Are you friends with them? Because if you are, you can't say anything. I get that.
I don't. I've met some of them briefly, but
band bro code. I get it. I've never met them, so I can speak freely.
So Gorilla Biscuits came to mind for me because it's like really good East Coast kind of melodic hardcore. Man, I don't know.
So among my friends, if Jimmy Eat World did Clarity front to back, that's not so loud.
Rowdy, but I would be there for that in a second.
Yeah, it's not as loud, but like that would be. That's you.
They play Clarity like the.
That would actually be perfect for 40-year-olds.
A bunch of 40-year-olds would say, "For me, this is heaven." Tying it in to the podcast.
Wait, by the way, earlier was your jab comment about the Metaxas thing a pun or was that accidental? I think it was accidental.
Oh, that was accidental. Nice.
Really good, but I didn't.
Metaxas jab.
I had to get that jab in there, and I was like, he didn't see it. Oh, dang it.
More like had to get that sucker punch in there. Yeah. Okay, who else? This is good.
It's so subjective though.
Yeah, it is, but I like the question.
When I try to think about this stuff.
What I'm trying to envision is like myself at 21 in my bedroom in our shared college house that Sherwood lived in, and what videos have I downloaded from Kazaa that I watch over and over again, and I just like freak out, like I'm standing up and air guitaring or whatever. Like, what are those videos? So that's when I went to At the Drive-In because I would watch those over and over again.
See, here's what's weird though: is certain things age differently. Like
totally,
and I don't know why. So if I'm like AFI, like I would have raged on that at a certain point when I was younger, but now I'm like, not that I don't.
Yeah, they're good, but
whatever. But like, if I was at the show right now, I wouldn't like freak out. But if I was,
we're not putting Offspring on the 7-band lineup, right? So it hasn't aged quite the same.
Well, or like, but Gorilla Biscuits, something's different there for me. I'm like, yeah. This is like, I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's because that was easy.
What if Pedro played all old songs?
I like all of the Pedro.
I want Bazan. Yeah, it would be David Bazan playing all the most explicitly Christian songs only, and not being sarcastic about it. Actually, this has happened, I think, at like a festival. I don't know if they ever toured, but Further Seems Forever played with Chris Carrabba on vocals. I would love to see that. That would be for me. Oh, Dustin, big head wave. Big feels over here. No? Not a further guy.
Okay.
I just know
Can't talk publicly about.
Okay, good. You've met them. You know them. You can't talk publicly. I respect that. I respect the code, as I said earlier. I really do. I practice the code.
I don't know why. What about Led Zeppelin? If you can bring
No, but
anybody,
see, I just didn't think we were going. I was thinking about that. I didn't think we were going to go that far back. Beatles rooftop concert trip. I feel like doing the Jack Black bit from High Fidelity. How about fucking
Wait,
Smells Like Teen Spirit, side
I feel
A,
like
track 1,
wait, this is like a segue into Bill and Ted's Face the Music,
which I haven't seen yet. All right, let's move on. Next question. We filled that bracket out at least halfway.
Brutal, Dan.
well, I know, Dan.
I'm watching again tonight. Okay.
I'm watching The Clock. That's what I'm watching, and so we need to move on.
Okay, so next question. If you and your best friends are sitting around and you're going to have a bottle of scotch while you listen to an LP all the way through, what record do you pull out?
And what scotch?
Oh,
Love that.
We'll go with high quality PD scotch. What about something I mailed you that you can't purchase unless you live in Scotland? Like 100-pound bottle.
Okay, 100-pound bottle that would be hard to find here, and we don't have to pay for it. And so you're sending the scotch, and then we're picking the record.
And you and a couple of your friends, and
buddies.
you're like, it's a group spiritual exercise. We're going to sip this bottle while we listen to this whole record straight through.
This is a great question, actually.
Friend, spiritual experience.
Here's what came to mind. Godspeed You Black Emperor, Lift Your Skinny Fist to the Sky. I think that's what it's called. I don't know. I think that's like, I have a vivid memory of listening to that record all the way through with, I don't even remember who, but with one or two people with candles and just tripping out. But I would do that again.
I would say Marvin Gaye, What's Going On would probably be the record, because
That's
for
very
a
different.
really nice scotch, I don't want loud music. I want the music to be slightly meditative, so that our conversation can be there and we can
Let's
talk
imagine
about.
not talking.
Well, if you're gonna have $160 bottle of scotch, you're probably gonna want to talk about it a little bit, right? Now it's fairly easy for me to answer. At least I have a few ideas for the scotch I'd like, because I have been in a scotch club for most of the last 4 years or so, and so we always pool our money and we get quite nice bottles and stuff. And so my answer is going to be the Springbank 12, which is quite hard to find here in the States and is an all-timer from the Scotch Club.
What region?
I believe it is a Speyside, but it might be a Highland. I don't think it's a Isla, but that is generally my favorite. But that Springbank is fantastic.
I like, it's not easy to find here. You can find it some places, but Colila. It's Isla.
Oh yeah, dude. That's like the most
oily?
popular scotch among old Scottish men.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's like the standard.
It's like
He is an old Scottish man.
It's like you took like a nice Lagavulin and mixed it with a little bit of Lafroig and then added oil to it or something.
It's slightly more drinkable than Lagavulin and Lafroig, but it's plenty peaty. Love it.
Do you know what I'm saying about the oily? Like it feels oily in your mouth a little bit.
I haven't had it in a year or so I can't remember oil. And I also have a shitty palate.
Different. All right.
I was gonna go with Exodus.
Oh,
like
Bob Marley?
Yeah. Like,
love that pick. I would probably go Kaya if I was gonna go Marley though, but that's fine.
Well, Exodus has like the coolest opening track where it like and it like slowly comes in, and I just feel myself like pouring the scotch as it comes in like that.
That's a weird call for Marley.
I love
late. It's late Marley, dude.
I like Marley.
Exodus is late Marley. Making a bold choice here, Trip. I got a question that just came in on the chat that I'd like, that was asked of me, but I want to ask it of you guys, and I will think about it too. 3 movies that could qualify as a religious experience. Road to Edmund is not allowed. for this one.
Well, I don't know.
Need-
I wouldn't say that because I don't even know if you both watched it. Because
Don't bring up
Dan
the wound. Don't bring up the
Dan
wound, Trip.
Dan won't even
Wait, what if we?
watch his friend's movie.
You
I
haven't
started
watched it?
I started
No.
it. Let's not litigate this
No,
again. I'm
no,
a
he
bad friend in the sense of I'm not so good at like reading my friends' screenplays or watching this and giving them
doesn't.
feedback.
It's
I'm
okay.
not good at it.
I only brought it up just because I know it makes him feel a little bit guilty,
It
and
does. It
and
does.
so
It's very
it's
funny,
kind.
and
It's like
very
if he
moving.
watched it, it would ruin the enjoyment I bring.
Yeah. Now I have
I
to
should
not
start
watch it
forwarding you.
out of love for you. I have to
Yeah,
continue to not watch
I'm
it so
gonna
you
start
have it
forwarding
over
you
me.
emails people send me because they're like, this meant so much to me. I'm just gonna be like, hey, at least you didn't watch it.
That's good.
Three movies that were like a
hold on.
religious
What about
experience.
what? If, wait. What if we reframe it to be 3 scenes from movies?
I would say you can answer either one.
Ooh.
I feel like
I'm
they'd be
I'm less
different
of a
answers.
here's what
scene
came to
guy.
mind. Here's what
Okay,
came to mind
let's hear 'em.
instantly when you asked that. The scene in Gross Point Blank. Have you both seen that?
Yeah, but years ago, but I've multiple times.
Trip, have you seen that movie?
Gross Point Blank.
The John Cusack movie
Really good.
Oh yeah.
with Minnie Driver.
You just dismissed it with your yes. Anyway, you need to watch it.
Dismissed it with your yeah.
It's really good. Soundtrack's great. But there's a scene where John Cusack, who is, this is not giving away too much. Everyone should go watch this. I've seen it many times, but he's a hitman, and he's come back to his high school reunion. He bailed out like at the prom or something and joined the army, became this weird hitman, and then has come back to his 10-year high school reunion. And he's trying to reconnect with this gal that he was in love with. And it's real weird and complicated and great. But someone hands him a baby at the high school reunion, and Under Pressure is playing. And it's my favorite use of music in any movie, I think. And it is a fantastic moment. Him just looking in this baby's eyes, and that song's playing. And it's great.
All right. So 3 movies, religious experience, scene specific.
Sure.
Okay. Tiny Dancer, Almost Famous.
Oh,
Tiny Dancer, amazing song.
the
Almost
bus.
Famous.
On
Dude,
the
I haven't seen it in
bus.
so long. I don't even remember what
They've just had a real dramatic scene. Everyone's mad at each other. This is, I believe it's after they have the big blow up when Jimmy Fallon is there and he's like, I'm one of the blurry guys, right? And then they start singing Tiny Dancer. It is an all-time music scene. And that's also my number 1 movie of all time. Just saying.
Just hold on, just saying both of these have included music so far very prominently.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so the other one is the Eucharist scene in Romero, right? Like where the soldiers occupy the church and they're like kicking everyone out and they won't let him in. And he just starts the mass. Oscar Romero, Martyr, El Salvador. If you haven't watched Romero, you should. One of the best
Haven't
movies
seen
of all
it.
time. Really?
I know.
Oh my
I
God.
should.
It's better than The Road Deadman.
If you can believe it.
If you can believe it. It's one of the most powerful movies. I've probably watched it 15 times. I don't know. I've used it in lots of classes. The other one, like for religious experience, and this is straight up just, I watched this movie so many times to my best friends that the scene became memorable, even though it's not a religious scene. It's a Stinky Palm scene in the Kevin Smith, it happens twice in Kevin Smith films, but
I knew you were going to say one of these Kevin Smith movies even before I knew which one it was.
You know where the dad is like,
I haven't seen
all
Mallrats
like, I
in
don't
a
know
long
if you,
time.
and so they're like, you got to give him the Stinky Palm, and
I don't know.
Oh, I haven't seen that forever.
well, I won't describe it, but it's a
that's-
means of distributing stinkiness by shaking someone's hand.
So I'm going to tell a story. Annie, who asked the question, she mentioned Thin Red Line, which I actually just rewatched the Thin Red Line like 3 weeks ago. So it's fresh in my mind. And yeah, like that opening sequence in Thin Red Line where he is just in the sort of Polynesian village hanging out. Is I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. That is among my favorite Malick films, and he's among my favorite directors. But actually, I have a whole film, Boyhood, the Linklater film, which follows the same actors for 12 years or whatever it is. And I had an experience with that film where it was. I'll tell this as short as I can, and then I got to go to the bathroom. By the way, I think I've gone 2 times now, or 3, and you guys haven't gone once, which is normal.
I
I
went
have
once
this.
during the break.
Oh,
But
you went once. Okay.
you threw it at me one time and then ran out the door.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I did. So I have the bladder of my 6-month-old son. We have the same size bladder apparently. But
But not the diaper.
no, I don't have the diaper. I can control it better. It's just the size is what's similar. So when I was in Stockholm, I'll tell it as quick as I can. One time we were in Stockholm, and my family is Scandinavian. My mom is full Norwegian Swedish, and I saw a group of people there. They were, I guess mentally disabled adults, and there was a one or two sort of caretakers with them at this outdoor sort of what's it called, theme park. And this woman looked like my mom if my mom had whatever sort of mental thing that this woman had going on. And it was very weird. I felt depressed all day afterward. I didn't really know what to make of it. It really affected me and I wasn't sure why. Then I watched Boyhood, and I had the exact same feeling after Boyhood that I felt seeing this woman who looked so much like my mother. And what I ended up putting them together as, I think, is that they were like these tangible examples of like the worth of a human life, like so far beyond what I can ordinarily feel toward another human because of my various heuristics and biases and all of the things that get in the way of that. And so Boyhood to me was like a God's eye view of a life. And it ended up being a tremendously religious experience for me. And I haven't rewatched it yet, even though I own it, because I kind of don't want to, because I don't know if it'll be the same. But that's the one that comes to mind.
All right, go
And I'll be right back.
Well, I have a question that's Dustin specific that someone emailed me. So
we're moving on. All right.
well, unless you want to say something else, I just knew he was leaving. So
I can't think of anything else right now, but I want to. I wish I could. Okay, go.
all right. A long time ago, Dustin wrote a song called "In Exile," which I assume is true. I guess it was only one POTUS ago, but it certainly feels longer. Anyway, I've always sort of found the premise of the song somewhat problematic. It emphasized the sort of
Definitely
fleetingness.
more than one POTUS ago, but go on.
So it was like W.
Oh, I see what he's saying. One. Oh yeah. Okay.
I don't know.
Sense, I think. Okay, go on.
Anyway, it emphasizes sort of fleetingness to the world we live in. For us, comfortable bearded white guys, which I guess that's a feature of this conversation, who suffer from road rage and long lines, I think creates an allowing of deep and dark suffering that occurs for most humans in the world. It allows for suffering by assuring us that the world isn't really real, everlasting world, and whatever happens here is fleeting. I wonder if your perspective has changed with some of the process theology influences. For those of us who are not so sure there's anything waiting at the end of the road, this world seems terribly important.
Dan, we're talking about someone's asking me through a trip about In Exile, which I think we probably talked about in that conversation we had recently. Which is
came up briefly. Yeah. I am a something, a wanderer.
Yeah,
I'm
right.
something just passing through, right?
Here's a commercial for
That's not a commercial. What I just did is not a commercial.
No.
Dan writes commercials. He knows commercials.
Yeah, I'll tell you a fucking commercial, okay?
Yeah, Wendy's is about to show up.
But no,
One,
it's a kind of it's a very much like this world is not my home kind of a
oh,
song. Yeah.
but hold on, we just talked about it, but
Oh,
I'll get deeper into it. I think,
please.
or maybe I no, maybe I only did I briefly did I talk? Feel like we talked about
You mentioned it in our
because you
plug
asked me.
patron only episode of Carry the Fire. Yes.
Yes, so I do lyric breakdowns on the lowest tier of my Patreon for Carry the Fire. Um, and Dan did one recently, and we talked about the song Silhouette. But
Silhouette.
I don't
Bum,
know,
bum,
was it
bum,
that episode that you
bum,
asked me
bum,
about
bum,
this? Anyway,
dun,
we
dun,
started talking
dun.
about this.
It might have been us doing our other one for we
It
did a
might have been
Patreon episode
okay,
for
so there's
me
another Patreon
after
episode
that. Yeah,
for
it
you.
might have been that. Whatever.
Go check that out. But basically, I've talked about this because it's kind of a good test case for people asking, hey, you've changed your views on things, and you wrote songs that had views on things. Uh,
I always
and
go straight for that kind of content when I can, you know.
yeah, so that's a good one because I literally had told the band for a while I don't want to play the song, and that's actually the only one that I've done that with that's like been, hey, let's play the song, and I've been like, I don't want to
Is it the
because
most popular song from that record?
it's
Like most
one
streams or whatever?
of the more popular. It had a video. It was just like
Okay.
a road
It's the
video.
song that stuck with me most from that record.
It's a good song.
It's a good song. It's got good
but
melody.
I didn't. It came from a C.S. Lewis quote talking about. He's talking about like if there's a desire present and no satisfaction of that desire,
Yeah,
then
it's an argument. It's an ontological argument for God's existence, basically.
yeah. And so it's saying like, fish wants water. Or I don't know if the fish was one of them.
Right.
I thirst and water exists, right? I hunger
Right.
and food exists. And then he's like, there's something in me that is I can't really find satisfaction for in this world. I get little hints of it.
Right.
And I think that's a fascinating argument
It's
for
yeah.
something that is beyond normal human sensation, right? Why do we crave something that's beyond the normal
Yeah.
everyday whatever?
Before you go on, I'll just say in an episode that I taped but hasn't aired yet, where Sarah Lane Ritchie and I talk about our birth experiences of our children, we talk about that argument and relate it to the experience of being with our kids, our young kids, and there's a similar kind of unquenchable desire that goes on there. But anyway, go on.
Yeah, so and there's probably 15 ways to try to explain that. A way to be nothing other than random misfirings of something. But I think that that's not super tenable or satisfactory when you try to break it down. So that was the basis of that song, was this kind of idea of there's something more. I thought that quote was interesting, and I wrote the song based out of that. But post song, even before apologies, Trip Philosopher, my deconstruction of certain sorts. Apologies to
Good.
Trip.
Do it.
Caputo,
Needle him.
everyone.
It's fucking needle him. Do it.
Listen, words can mean more than one thing. Caputo.
Yeah, they can.
Down with
Caputo,
that.
get the fuck off our shoulders.
Oh, he'd be down with that.
He's massaging those shoulders, helping you to come up with creative exegesis of previously written material.
What would
what I'm
Jesus
saying. All right.
deconstruct, Dustin? Go on.
Seriously, that's kind of the funny thing about the deconstruction thing that gets hung up on. It's like, come on, the whole point is you're finding new meanings.
Right.
All right. Anyway.
By the
okay.
way, I'm on drink number 3, so which is actually more like drink number 5 if you want to count alcohol units like they do in the UK. Number 5, 12-ounce, Millers or whatever. So if you want to either get something out of me or needle me with something, now is the time. But go ahead.
Good. So basically, that was the impetus. I was talking about the Trip, the C.S. Lewis quote about desire not being met in this world. Therefore, it speaks of some other world or something.
Does that imply the presence of something else?
Yes. So that was the impetus for writing the song. But even before said deconstruction, whatever, I became bothered by the fact that I could see that it could be interpreted in a way that was this kind of like, well, this world's gonna burn, so fuck it, and it doesn't matter what we do. That kind of mentality, which is very prevalent, especially in the kind of evangelical,
Yeah.
white world
I
in
see.
the
So
West.
there's that kind of, yeah, that
and
resonance.
and so that started bothering me. And then, especially later on, I was like, man, this is a bummer to me, the way that I feel like this could be used. And then I ended up really kind of trying to engage the song again, and I realized I think that there's a very valid and compelling way to look at it, where the idea of exile in the song is saying, look, I'm not going to be satisfied with the state of things as they are, right? Like,
There's a kind of,
things
yeah,
are,
there's like a liberationist angle on it.
yeah, there's things are not right around me. And so I will live in contrast to that. I will try to bring about a different kind of being, and I won't be satisfied
Reconstruction.
until that comes to be. So
Hell
I,
yeah.
I I publicly kind of talked about it on Twitter. That was a few years ago, and I'm sure you can imagine that made people really excited. You know?
Whenever
Made a
people
lot of
say
people
things,
mad. Um,
whenever
Twitter
I or
is a
anyone else says,
cesspool of affirmation.
when anybody says I publicly, whatever, I think of the scene in The Office where someone tells Michael Scott to declare bankruptcy, and he just goes, I declare bankruptcy.
So the
Okay.
one short aside is that C.S. Lewis, unlike most conservative evangelicals, sees the gap of desire as a generative positive thing, and the gap or lack of desire for more conservative Christians is a destructive thing,
yeah, yeah.
something to be feared and overcome.
Oh,
For
absolutely.
how that plays out also in post-Christian or post-atheist or post-theistic context, and how it relates to theological ones. See the Fiona Ellis episode of Homebrewed Christianity recently, and you can see the Whitehead as generative relationship to desire. Really, that whole like negative desire thing is a hangover from Augustine, and there's more than one.
We have a nice comment here, by the way, from someone named Matt Gorkos about In Exile. He says that he always connected that song with the Hauerwas Willimon book, Resident Aliens, which interestingly gets a perspective of Christian community not too far off from what Tripp was saying earlier about the community that helps define understanding.
I don't want to get triggered on my Hauerwas issues, and I know that's what you're trying to do, Dan.
I'm not. No, I'm not. I don't know what your Hauerwas issues are.
Oh,
I don't listen to your show quite enough, I guess, to know that.
no, this was years before. You were talking to Tony Jones, so like back in early emergent days, Tony
But
Jones.
if you can believe it, Tony and I
leaders.
didn't spend all that much time talking about you when he was
When you
on my
said
podcast.
his name, it made me think of in 08, 09, 2010, we had multiple episodes where all these people that were part of the Hauerwasian Mafia called in, and we just like ranted about it.
I just hope that there is a mafia named after me someday. That's my takeaway from that. But increasingly,
The Coke
as
Mafia.
Charles Taylor says, as we move away from a magical enchanted world into a secular unenchanted world, and I keep doing religious enchanted work, I'm less and less likely to have a mafia named after me. This is my
sad is
ego-centered
that?
problem.
You need a mafia. Also, if my thoughts about Resident Aliens are on the episode I did with Hauerwas and Willimon about it. So if you haven't checked out that episode, you should go see it.
Matt,
Hauerwas
check
was
out the
less
episode.
thrilled with my responses. Willimon's a nice preacher and was kind of entertained.
Anyway, I just thought it was another possible way of thinking about the song that didn't
I
have to be
I don't know if I know this song.
dispensational evangelical escapism, is all I'm saying.
There's a
I don't think it has
16
to be.
song playlist.
It can lend itself that way.
It can lend itself that way, which I understand why that was your worry. Or to quote one of my favorite movies, this is our concern, dude.
But Elgin has a 16-song playlist of Dustin, and I know those 16 songs very well.
How many Sherwood songs are on Elgin's playlist?
He hadn't really come to one of these
Is he
shows yet.
asleep, or could you wake him up and
But
ask
if you
him?
introduced him to Aaron Sprinkle, I would become a legend. He loves Aaron Sprinkle.
I might be able to make that work.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Is like if you asked him
After
of like
COVID.
his favorite bands, he's like, well, we have like Thrice, U2, Greta Van Fleet, Imagine Dragons.
Wait till
Aaron
he hears
Sprinkle.
Zeppelin. If he likes Greta Van Fleet, wait till he gets a hold of Led Zeppelin, man. Fleet. Greta on.
It's not Fleek like on Fleek.
Greta Van Fleet.
It's with a T.
Greta Van Zeppelin.
Yeah.
Well, I also don't know them, so I'm not violating the rules.
For listening to that, and I have before, because it's
he's complained about it, but I want you to know I saw him in concert very close. It was so good, and I wish I could sing like that guy. And if I could, I would go. Yeah, but I've also seen Robert Plant sing, and no time while I was alive and could enjoy music could he sing like that.
Yeah, but if you watch The Song Remains the Same or something, he very much could sing like that.
Yeah, but was it making my balls shake while that volume was that loud and you're there and everyone's like,
so we get better amplifiers is what you're saying.
Yeah, you're saying the problem is that they didn't have good amplification in 1976.
You both know the sheer experience of being in a live place where everyone's singing a song and some guy's doing something that everyone that normally could impress their friends singing, you can't do. And then the guitar player is playing an SG and does a guitar solo behind his head. Yeah, it was all pentatonic, but it's still badass because they're all wearing hippie outfits. So it works.
I just can't. I get it. I just can't do these bands that are just where the idea of the band is just one other band that you know already.
Well,
I'm sorry. I'm out on that.
That's the entirety of Christian subculture.
Sure, I don't listen to any of it.
No.
I don't listen to any of it.
5 Iron Frenzy is great.
Not the Christian underground, the CCM stuff, right? Yeah.
I know.
It's
if
like
you're gonna go CCM, you need to mainline it. You need to go with straight CCM. Like, don't go with like it sounds like. Just go with it sounds like Michael W. Smith because it is.
Yeah.
Whoa, you got a nicely timed delay there on your.
Well, I do what I can.
Trippy. I don't think you did it on purpose. All right, you have another question for us, Trip?
Oh,
wait,
yeah.
I have one. I didn't get that.
Oh, Dustin, go. I didn't get any from. I posted this everywhere and got 0 questions.
I have 14 more.
Paul has a question for Trip as an author. Are there other forms of music aside from other books authors that inspire you to write, such as music, paintings, dance, etc.? Please discuss.
Oh, so when I write, I listen to albums in their entirety that I know completely. So like August and Everything After. I one time very inebriated, someone was like, you know August and Everything After? And I was like, yes. And I proceeded to just sing it by a campfire. Like, that album's like, I know it very, very closely.
You thing I've ever heard, I think.
Larry Norman's Only Visiting This Planet. Carbon Leaf's Indian Summer. Oh, so good. Albums I know, and some of the albums I know completely, I'm not going to mention because y'all judge me because they're not that good.
Please tell us.
But is it that you know them completely so that they a little bit can kind of go into the background and not draw you in?
Well, no, it's like you got your, you know how like some people like, I dress for success, I listen for success. I put something on where it's like, yeah, you know what's going on, like Slowly Going the Way of the Buffalo's playing.
Hell yeah.
Like, if you can't write a good fucking article while Slowly Going the Buffalo is playing, you can't write. Why? Best MXPX album ever. Like,
I don't see the causal. I don't see the causal relationship there at all. But I do like the record.
It's so good. What album do you think's better than that?
ever or MXPX albums?
MXPX albums. Like it's easily the
I
best.
think Life in General is probably better.
Yeah, I think so.
You have to
Dude,
skip.
do you
I
know
like
how
it.
good Life in General sounds today? Like they made that
You-
record on a comparatively medium budget on tape in like 1996. And if you play it today and A-B it with another heavy record or a punk record, that record sounds incredible. I can't believe how good it sounds.
I like all first 6 albums of MXPX.
Everything up to Ever Passing Moment, right? Then it gets
Well,
weird.
yeah, once they were like
Uh-oh.
responsibility.
Does
What's
Dustin
that?
know? Mike, can you not talk about it because you're
No,
friends?
I don't know if I could name a record past Buffalo.
Ever
That's
Passing Moment
because
is the one after Buffalo.
yeah, it was.
That's
but
the next one.
but their newest one I listened to and I really liked it.
Yeah, it was good too. I did hear that, not a lot, but I heard it and I was like,
Yeah, there's a couple songs.
The first 2 Five Iron Frenzy albums I listened to quite a bit.
Five Iron holds the fuck up, dude. Okay, here's
Actually,
a
I
hint.
can't
Never
mention
had-
Ryan Adams because he's been canceled. And
You
it
can
is
mention him in
really-
a negative light. That's approved.
Okay, I'm against all of his life decisions.
I'm against
except
Ryan Adams. However,
when he make not the questionable decisions, but just like him being in a depressive state leads to high quality albums. Do y'all have songwriters? This is not a question someone sent in. Where when you see them on Twitter doing something dumb, you're like, oh, junk. In like 9 months, we're gonna have a good album.
no, I've never.
And
I've never thought that. No.
oh, okay. Well, I have on a number of people, but we can move on. I'm not their minister, you know. I always think like, and then if you feel them happy, you're like, I like you better when you're connected to my nihilistic tendencies.
Yeah, there's something interesting there about sort of art and pain. And actually, Dustin, I'm going to turn this into a question for you because your show is all about the true, the good, and the beautiful. But there is a sense in which a lot of things that are really beautiful come from people who maybe in the moment they're saying something true. They have gotten themselves given their creative capacities to say something true, but their lives do not reflect a lot of beauty or goodness or truth. Just the thing that they made does. And I wonder, because like that is pretty divorced from like a virtue based approach, right? Of like the good person will make the good thing or something like that.
Yeah. Are you asking if it's okay?
I didn't phrase that very well.
To be human. If
No,
you
I
make
just mean
art?
I don't. Is there's something interesting about almost like people who
Here's my theory on it. It generally is that there is a lot that's happening all the time, and if you are in a quote happy state and don't have a lot of contemplative life, you won't be seeing, like you'll be just blazing by. And I think that those who are in certain mental states are seeing those things, wrestling with those things, that often have a lot of like there's a heaviness when you kind of dig in, and that can be overwhelming. But regardless, it makes for something interesting as you're making art. I don't think it's the only path there.
it's not the only path, but I think
it's a path there, and it's a path that is ignored and not sought out often when you're not in that place.
okay, I want to counter that.
Okay.
I want to say the digging in is the through line. This is my off the cuff theory. And in fact, we focus more often on the sad artist who digs into the pain because he or she has no choice but to dig into the pain because their life's so shitty. And we actually spend less time focusing on, for instance, the Jason Isbells of the world who got clean and then once he was clean, really focused on the craft and just went to work every day in, day out, worked a long time on songs, and is now one of the best living songwriters.
Yeah, he's great.
He's
What?
great, but he wasn't great when he was in Drive By Truckers. He was great afterwards when he was
I,
sober.
I think he was also great in Drive By Truckers,
Okay, but now he's like the greatest.
he's
He's
very.
among the greatest now, and he's been sober for like 12 years.
Who are you talking about? Who's ignoring him?
I just mean, no, like obviously he is acknowledged for his accolades, but I think that we focus more on the Kurt Cobain's type
Yeah, but
stories.
it's just easy. I think that's more we're talking about. It's easier to lionize someone after they're dead.
Or the Connor Obersts. Oh my gosh, I have located myself in an age
No,
group and
but
subculture.
I think that's a great analogy. Well, to counter what you're actually saying, but I don't. I think the fact that like Connor's still putting out music, and I would say like it's good, but if Connor had died from some tragic thing and
Elliott
years
Smith,
ago,
right? Yeah.
right, it would be, oh man, and you don't have anything else to like compare to the old stuff and whatever. It's just you know, we're weirdly nostalgic and there's all sorts of things wrapped up in that. But I think that someone like Jason Isbell is a good example of someone who continually uses the pain and the places he was in to write good songs from a healthy space that he's in now. And that ends up connecting him to humanity as a whole.
Well, it's true, and there's songs like, especially on Southeastern, like about cancer and about like there's a lot of pain in those songs, but now he's able to, so he's both a practitioner and like seems like he's done some therapy, like he's done like
I'm
some
sure.
personal work where he can sustain his attention on the pain for long enough without going into a drunken stupor from that sustained attention, and then apply his songwriting craft. And to me, he's like the paragon of craftsmanship. I think about him more than anybody else when I think about like making something good, which I think about a lot more often than I pursue in my actual life.
Yeah.
You Have Permission is like off the cuff, most of it. I'm talking about really crafty. Like Dustin's still making records. He's writing songs. That's the kind of craft. I'm not doing anything like that right now. And I think
That-
about it, but I don't do it.
I mean,
Stan.
wasn't it Paul that asked that question?
St. Paul?
No, the one Dustin just
That's
asked.
the original question of the inspiring music. We're kind
Yeah,
of on a
because
slightly different topic.
he had emailed me a variation of that, and in it was something about like the difference of writing a book and doing a podcast or whatever. Like, I kind of edit a podcast, but I mostly think just because of how I listen to them, if they sound like friends talking or two intellectuals that I want to hear what happens when they don't know each other and show up, like I want the podcast to sound like a normal conversation between
Right.
people.
This is
But like the book, like I've had that, if you read Divine Self-Investment, has been read by some of my smartest friends. They gave me shit about it, and then I answered their questions or thought that's dumb. And I want you to ask me that question so I can argue with you about it. You know, like I didn't mean dumb like I'm putting my friends down, but like I really believe these. Like, and I think that's like people that are creators have that different relationship, and that's why if you follow creators that have multiple content streams, I was talking to one of my friends that's a comedian. I don't know if he would want me to tell the story, but in the abstract, he would just say,
don't tell us who the comedian is.
okay, was I do podcasts all the time, but that's just so they show up so I can do like my thing. Like I want to, like, he's like, I don't care about the podcast. I care about the fact I have a relationship with these people, and I let them know about my life. I let them know about all these things, because what I really want them to do is show up and see the hour I've spent the last year doing. And
Right.
every time they give feedback, it gets better. He's like, I want them to see that, because when they see that, whatever I'm BSing about each week on the podcast to tell them where I'm going to be is worth it, because they're like, that was fine. But when he shows up, boom shakalaka, right? Like, and And I think it's important to know an artist like when that is, or like even your minister, right? Like judging someone on their like summer sermon series, like they're in the summer too, but that's different than like Lent. You
Okay,
spend your
I have
whole year
literally
on Lent and
never
Advent.
thought this before. I've never delineated between my pastor's sermons during the liturgical year. That's some inside fucking baseball right there, man.
Oh yeah, we plan out the three churches of size I've worked at. Lent and Advent are on every staff meeting thing. Like, and as whoever's preaching which parts or in
Right.
charge of thing
Working
becomes
along
clear,
ahead.
then all the artists related to it, liturgy,
Yeah.
and everything gets planned out.
No, we
Why?
had we had that for just that handful of weeks, but like April versus July, I've never, or May versus July or September or whatever. I've never
That's
really
why I
fought that
think
stuff.
no minister should preach more than 30 weeks, because if you let your youth minister and associate minister free in the summer, like they've been wanting to preach every Sunday since they got there. They're going to
Yeah,
have
let them
some of their
preach.
A material, and you're
Love it.
sitting there going like, do I need to go in until Thursday?
Yeah, I can't relate to this part of the conversation, so I'll just say
What about Rustin Kelly?
I have an in
Y'all know him?
between.
I
What?
Rustin Kelly, like after he got clean in his new album,
I don't know who that is.
Shape and Destiny.
Nope.
All right, so it's like Americana.
Is it like the Joe Scarborough record from Morning Joe?
No, it's not like Joe Scarborough.
I don't know. I
I
was
don't.
thinking about that yesterday. That because they always did that on
Why?
SNL, and he would be like,
Okay, maybe,
"Yeah, the
maybe
guy. It's
SNL
so
reference, but
good."
the
All
fact
right.
that Joe Scarborough came up with me talking to you is depressing, because I feel like I try to fit in as many socialist
No, this was not
asides.
an invitation to politics. This was
I
not an invitation
try
to
to
politics with you
just give
guys.
you as
Oh shit.
many asides as you can handle without feeling inappropriate. Like, but no. Okay, well, I'm going to text y'all this. Rustin Kelly, great songwriter. His first two albums were good. Like, I enjoyed them. His new one, Shape and Destiny, is after divorce and rehab.
Whoa.
And if you were to imagine it as a record, he just stuck it in his mainstream and completely tells the truth. And no, I liked it. Nathan, who was like my main partner for the podcast for years,
Right.
um, and I were
Co-star
talking
of the Road to Edmond.
co-star, the real star. Like I was like
Right.
this,
He's the star. You're the
yeah,
supporting actor. He was the
the
main
the
actor.
one that when his shirt came off, you were excited.
I
Like,
didn't get that far, but yeah.
oh,
Sure.
well, then you
It's a good looking guy though. Built. It's fucking built.
well played, Dan. But anyway, he like, his master's degree was in music, and he plays in lots of bands, like a studio musician, guitar player. So he's like or earlier, he's like, always think like if you wrote songs like that, like you did theology, it would sound like this guy. So we've always talked about his albums. This new one comes out. We had this text exchange where I was like, what the hell happened? Like all of a sudden you're like, oh, I love Americana music in the background. And next thing you know, like blood's just pouring into your ear blood, like right into your ears. Anyway, you should check it out.
Blood's just pouring into your ear blood. Okay. I want to give you guys a chance because
Earbuds,
earbud.
earbuds,
Got it. Blood's pouring
not
into
your
your earbuds.
earbloods.
I think you said earblood.
Yeah, he definitely
Yeah.
said it.
I don't think I have had that many drinks.
It's
Okay.
midnight here, and I've had a
Connor
lot,
asks this.
so it was earbuds.
Connor asks, why is Dan so conservative? Which is
Yeah.
incredible because I am like firmly center left. I've read The Righteous Mind, but I still can't understand. I know Connor. He's in the You Have Permission Facebook group, you piece of shit. But I did think I was going to ask you, Trip, if you got any questions that would lend themselves to you guys giving me shit for being such a centrist. I was just thinking, I've actually had enough to drink that we could have this conversation right now,
Okay.
and it wouldn't bum me out.
Okay, can I ask you one more religious question that I really wanted to know what y'all thought?
Please.
Like someone sent it and I was like, this is too good not to ask.
Go.
All right.
Do it.
So the question was, Sally Glendenfather is German looking.
Love that last name.
Said, uh, I know you're uncomfortable with the whole deconstruction, reconstruction, linear storytelling trip, but nonetheless, anyway, um, uh, at what point did your prayer life sound like reconstruction or second naivete or coming back again?
That's a great question.
I know that's a high quality question. I wish I'd thought of it because I would have framed it without.
I feel like we kind of talked about this, Dan. I think you asked me kind of about this a little bit on that episode we were talking about.
Please repeat it for all of our benefit.
I think that was what that was. But I think for me, when I hear that kind of question, it makes me like the place that I go with it is the reconstruction is just like Trip, don't give me shit about the language. Okay, so the deconstruction is I just don't know, right? I like for me at least, like I don't know, and there's not a lot of content there. And then for me, the reconstruction is like slowly building back in content and still being happy with not knowing. But so for me, it's just to borrow Dan's language. I feel like I have permission for my prayer life to be any which way, and that's okay. Like it doesn't look like quiet time. It doesn't whatever. Like it can
But
be.
that's a hallmark of reconstruction in a sense because you feel that
Yeah,
latitude.
that's what I'm saying. So like I can be, doing centering prayer in my closet, and I can be riding my bike. I could be, watching a movie with my kids, and those things all feel very uh, prayerful in some sense to me. And there's not like well, that's not doing the thing. Like that's for me what it felt like. Does that make
So
sense?
that's good. Yeah. Jesus said to pray in your closet, but I don't think he literally meant you have to be in the closet, Dustin. You can just
Thank
find a quiet space.
No, at this house, there's actually like it's like a triangle shape in there. There's like actually decent room, and
Oh,
it's a good way to get away
Yeah,
from.
well,
that's
we
good.
also know evangelicals don't think you can pray in the closet.
Oh, we have our house was built in 1961. It has tiny closets, mid-century construction. So my answer to that question is I don't have such a linear deconstruction reconstruction thing, even though I'm perfectly fine with that language, and tend to like it actually. But so a lot of my deconstruction happened like in my 20s around inerrancy and hell and like biblical violence and the Canaanite genocide and all that kind of stuff. When my prayer life shifted was about 6 years ago when I tried some basic contemplative practice. And that sort of blew open the doors for me. So for me, it was that my prayer life changes altered everything else. So not the other way, not that it was necessarily phrased as the other way around, but the prayer is what shifted things for me. And then I finally felt permission again to caught my own language to just admit that I was a liberal theologically and just pursue it and not feel weird or scared about that.
Hmm.
And so it actually had a kind of a causal effect for me to then go, oh, I can consolidate all this previous deconstruction that had been more piecemeal and just admit I'm a progressive Christian. That's what I am. And now I'll find these people. And that's around the time that I met people like Tripp and others at the American Academy of Religion conferences, Keith Ward, Tom Ord, those guys, Kyle Roberts, and and then that kind of started a whole new period for me of like, oh, like this is maybe my new kind of crew, and this is a way of living life that I was told didn't exist
Hmm.
in a faithful sort of Christian way, but it does exist.
Yeah, I
So,
had I had that same part of it where it's like, oh, I was told this was not a thing, and it's
Right.
absolutely.
Well, that is the hallmark of being raised evangelical. Like I almost want to come up with a new definition of evangelicalism and not have it be the 4 or 5 tenets of Bebbington's whatever, and have it just be like, were you told that your church just reads the Bible? You're an evangelical. Like that's
And
it's a
everyone else,
one it's
everyone
a
else.
one item it's a one
Yeah.
question rubric. And then everyone else, oh, but they focus on works, not grace, or fill it in however. We just read the Bible. That means you're an evangelical. And everything else is kind of, you know, window dressing.
That's funny.
It's plain meaning.
The plain, because when we think of documents written with plainness and literal
We think of the book of
correspondence,
Joshua.
yeah, Joshua, that's a rim dinger right there. Um, the my thoughts on like prayer, and I'll say that my transformations in my own faith, like I read the Bible and prayed every day when I was like not sure God existed. So like I was a Baptist atheist. So like whatever you want to deal with that. So but I would just say like when I became at home again in my piety in deep ways was in undergrad. I started reading Meister Eckhart, and he has a number of different sermons on gratitude. But he said that he gave advice to another monk struggling to pray. And he said, the only true prayer is thank you. And there's been a number of exercises built out of it. And so for a couple months, every day, beginning and end of the day, I started listing, and the goal is as specific as possible thank yous. And it would be like something like, I wrote a new book, and my friends decided to hop on and drink beverages with me while we hung out because they're really cool friends.
Ah,
Thank you. You know, whatever. Like, and and the goal is like as specific as possible. Because if you can do all that, then when you get done with the thank yous, whatever prayers come after that are, um, more attuned. And like
yeah.
it was true, right? I mean, I don't know what else to say about like that part. And the other was in my 20s, in a couple years span, my mom, my mother-in-law, had both had breast cancer, and we're newlyweds, Alicia and I, and my grandmother had just passed away from cancer. And it was like back to back to back. And near the end of my grandmother's life, when I was talking with her in the hospital, and she's in a treatment that doesn't expect healing or restoration of any sort, but it's more of a research type of thing, like for other people or whatever. And like if you're putting ice chips in your grandmother's mouth because it burns from the treatment that probably won't heal her, you're confused, right? um so I'm like you know trying to process that, and Nana was like, Trip, her phrase was, the Lord is on the throne regardless of where you are in the story, was her line. Now you can imagine, as an open relational process person, how problematic these statements. um and and if you were using it as a metaphysical description, then it's uncomfortable. If you're using it as of how the person of faith directs their subjectivity and what the affect of faith is, it's a very different thing. To say that, like, what a moment gives me is not something that can take away the dignity God's given me and the affirmation of God. That's a very different way of looking at it. And at that time was when I read Charles Hartshorne for the first time and John Cobb, and was trying to figure all that stuff out. And what does God being on the throne even mean? Right. And so like some of the responses out of that, and this is like one of the places where that birth of the book came from, is that God limits God's self when God creates, right? So like God isn't controlling everything, but God suffers with us or whatever. And the idea of the book was that God limiting is even problematic because that's like God has like two hands and ties a hand behind God's back. Is like,
Right.
I'm limited, friends. I only have one hand. And I'm like, no. If God's self-testimony in Jesus is correct, God isn't holding anything back. God's fully invested. God's whole divine self is poured out into the world because God refuses to be God without us. And that's because God is love and God loves enemies. And enemies do not have an identity apart from the one who gave them life. And reconciliation is the horizon of every act of disunity. Not because finite reality doesn't have the agency to say no, but because the infinite God of love promises to show up at each moment. Right. And so, like, to say, like, the Lord of enemy loving, infinite, persistent love is on the throne is a very different thing. And that, like, process of coming to a place where I knew that my prayers might not secretly be working against the will of God, but that I could pray as an ally of God, wanting my will to cohere with God's will from obviously a perspective bigger than a finite being. But like that transition was so life-giving because as a minister, and I was a minister in lots of contexts and a campus minister, most people that I encountered, whether they were religious or not, that would ask questions of professionally religious people, mostly wanted to know, like, here's what I'm doing. Am I doing good enough? And what I came to a place was the enough question is problematic. You've already done that because you're God's beloved. And that's like above your pay grade to change that status, like your value. It was established before you knew it was in jeopardy. And the second question, is it good enough? Is like whatever you can do that is God desires from you, something you can do. And then whatever you manage is the very destination. God gives you the gift of possibility again. And that's called open relational theology. But like prayer from me became an invitation to a world where I more or less cooperate with God moment to moment and get to tell stories, create context, create habits and praxis where I can hopefully attend more faithfully to the presence of God. And that was like my, like when I realized it wasn't either or for piety and prayer and all that kind of stuff, but a more of a craft and a honing and a habit, then it became something that I didn't like fear doing wrong, but I did not just on behalf of God, but behalf of like my wife and children and the people I work with and hopefully all of creation, right? Like if I attune to God's desires, I will like not suck as much.
Well, this is an interesting segue back into your book. If people are interested, they can read it and hear what you have to say about Jesus being faithful as opposed to perfect, which I think is interesting.
And I
like
am
that
guessing
part.
is found in the first half of the last chapter. No?
Well, that's recapping other parts, so I think it's a good place too. But
It's in the Spirit Christology chapter.
I got to peace out, my friends. But I would encourage folks to read the book that I've not fully read yet, but I'm going to. And
I also would encourage them to read the book that I have not fully read, but I'm going to.
me and Dad
Trip,
are
thank you.
working towards the middle of the book.
Yeah. And when
We're
we
both-
get there, we'll just have a nice long phone call and then we'll fill each other in and we'll be good.
Okay.
Trip, thank you for having us, man.
I didn't know I had you, but
Can I
It
leave with
was-
one parting thought that may or may not be good, but we might ponder?
yeah, I think
You know, In all this
yes.
God on the throne stuff, it had me thinking of the Tao and how there's like a balance, there's like a way things want to go. And so your grandmother being on her deathbed and saying God's on the throne and you feeling weird about it as an open and relational guy, there's like there's maybe like a more Eastern way of thinking about that, of like, it's like not so much as like God's on the throne as the powerful monarch or whatever, but that like there's like a thing that's gonna go. It's gonna happen, and like I'm limited and I'm a part of it and whatever. That I don't know might be an interesting angle into some of the worries about like, well, how effectual is God, and is a less effectual God a God worth worshiping? Well, is that like a really Western God that we need, this like super effectual, powerful, coercive God? Or could we take a page from the East? And I don't know. This is just the beginnings,
Taoist Buddhist.
3 drinks in.
Good. I like it.
I support the Tao.
And
It's
the NASDAQ?
related to Star Wars, but we can't talk about that right now.
No. All right. And Dustin's got to go, and I
yep.
should go help with my 6-month-old as well.
All right. Well,
Dada
y'all
had
for
too
hanging
much
out.
had too much data juice, and now he's being silly with you, Soren.
Dada juice.
Yeah. No, we don't have, he doesn't understand language yet, so we don't have that kind of
No,
language.
I was just
for him.
thinking of how clumsy of a decision that was. Dada juice just sounds like as a
Uh-oh, don't
Like-
do it. Don't go there.
oh no,
Uh-oh.
it's 12:15 here, but the Lakers play in an hour and 45 minutes.
So you're going to just party through the night.
Now I'll probably fall asleep, wake up at 5:30 in the morning, and watch the recap. But
Yeah.
currently, I'm committed to staying up. All right. So,
Okay.
yeah. Well, smoochy boochies, everybody. That is
This
in the
has been
same
an
movie where
episode
the
of the Homebrewed
Yes.
Christianity podcast.
Ah,
Featuring Trip Fuller, Dan Koch, and Dustin Kensrew.
oh yeah.
I'm not going to do that voice again. That was a one-time only.
I don't know. I really feel like I could clip that part and use it regularly.
Please don't. Unbelievable with Justin Brierly.
Oh,
I always think that's so
like,
silly.
is
that they
there a
have that.
podcaster you would more love to punch in the nuts than that guy?
I don't mind Justin. I just hate that intro voice. Premier
don't?
Christian radio. You know?
Maybe you don't have graduate students that are fundamentalist in America and feel edgy about listening to it, but that podcast, I'm always like, really?
I don't know what you guys are talking about, and I'm thankful. Oh,
Yeah,
Okay,
you should
see
be
ya. Get
thankful,
outta here.
Dustin.
all right.
I'll
Get outta
talk
here.
to you later.
All right.
And Dan,
Dustin's gone.
I know
And then there were 2.
the
But there's about to be 1 or 0 because I'm going to leave too.
well, I'm gonna leave because
I'm going to leave before you leave.
well, what can I just tell you one
Yeah,
thing?
Tell me. Yes. Nope, I'm
Dan,
gone. Just kidding.
No,
Please tell
I'm
me.
not gonna hang up on you. I thought about it for a second, like the cursor went over end, but I didn't.
Oh, can I
but-
say one more thing and then you leave and then I'm last? That would be funny.
Now I'm confused, but I'm also chemically imbalanced. So, what I was gonna say is, I really like looking at pictures of you with Soren. That's what I was gonna say.
Thank you. What are the
So if you
chances
don't
that
know,
this
Dan
makes
has a
the final
baby.
cut of the episode?
I love watching my friends with their babies. So like,
Follow me on Instagram, Dan Koch, Coke. Is that it? Yeah, that's what it
Yep.
is on Instagram.
like when I see Sarah and Sarah with babies, I'm like, oh, it's exciting. All my friends with babies,
It's
like
the best.
every time I see a baby post where someone's like, oh, I shared too many baby posts. No, 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 no. You don't understand. The rest of them are currently about the election, QAnon,
I know,
or
dude. Oh,
anxiety spews.
I
So,
know.
like, the more if you share pictures of like your cat or your dog
It's
or
the
your
best.
babies,
It's the best.
amazing.
I
You know
love it.
why?
I eat it up
I
too.
love babies. I love dogs, and I understand people love cats
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
know Annie's on this, and she posts a nice picture of her cats, and I affirm her relationship with her cats. I just have allergies, so I can't.
Annie and I are buds after this chat today. We're
I
friends.
know,
I'm gonna add her on Facebook right
but
now.
y'all have a similar vocation,
No, I didn't know
so
that.
you don't.
Oh, she's
Oh.
a therapist?
And she has posted some stuff on. Never mind. I don't
Found
want to
her.
broadcast, but y'all should be friends.
I'm adding you, Annie, right now.
Yeah.
We're Facebook friends if once you say yes.
Well, every Facebook, on sometimes they ask for consent. If it has sending stuff from Russia, they're like, no, we don't have to ask your consent to broadcast Russian propaganda. But for friendship making across citizens, then yes.
Hmm.
All right, Dan. The other thing I was going to say is, other than Soren pictures,
Yeah.
is I'm not joking about Elgin's inappropriate status of Aaron Sprinkle. Now, I love Aaron Sprinkle, but
You mean the solo records?
oh yeah, no,
Yeah.
he doesn't know that Aaron Sprinkle was in a band.
Or that he was a producer of many albums we love.
Nope.
Just
Like,
knows the solo records. That's it.
yeah, we
Doesn't
were
know
in the
Fair,
car.
doesn't know Poor Old Lou, doesn't know the Amberlynn records, the Emery
No,
records. No.
he
Okay.
knows Rose Blossom Punch. That's like my favorite Aaron Sprinkle album is the Rose
Yeah.
Blossom Punch album. Whatever that like compressed weird fuzz box distortion sound in it. If I was ever good enough at guitar to play a solo
That's what you
in
want to
multiple
play.
songs, I would want the Rose Blossom Punch Haunted Church guitar tone.
Okay.
That would be like when I arrived.
We
But
can loop him in on this.
but I'm just telling you, Elgin's just like, he's like, you too.
Thrice Aaron Sprinkle.
Yeah, he's like, there's just certain people, which if anyone's not listened to Aaron Sprinkle, great songwriter. His second solo, well, his first solo album, the blue one, I don't remember what the name of it is, like Moon Tracer, is that right?
Dude, I don't know his solo stuff.
You really don't? Okay,
No.
so I actually
We're
have all his
buddies, and
albums.
I'm more of like a Sprinkle as producer kind of a guy.
Okay, well, I like all of his solo albums, but first one was really good. Then he did one that was like, what would happen if Aaron Sprinkle did middle Beatles? And it was really good.
Great thought
And
experiment.
yeah, look, best melodies, like he'll have like a rhythm guitar part, this not rhythm guitar part that's like a counter melody with the vocal melody, and it like goes back and forth.
Tasty.
And so
I
I
love
would talk
Sprinkle.
about those. Elgin got into it, and then Aaron Sprinkle did like more electronica stuff, and now I listen to that.
Yeah. That's what he's kind of been doing more recently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you should listen to like Deer Hunter or whatever. And he's like, no, I like electronica. I'm like,
You look like the Deer Hunter band members, Trip.
well, everyone has a goal in life. And I just
All right, man.
crescendoed. All right. I'll talk to you later.
Thanks for having me, dude.
Smoochy Boochie Stan.